Hello, welcome to today's news broadcast. Today, we will talk about how the Swedish government dealt with the financial crisis from a cognitive perspective. First of all, I will give you a basic description on the different roles within the government as well as their group dynamics. The government is an enterprise, which consists of the Prime Minister and 23 other ministers. Every minister has their own remit and 13 of the ministers lead a department, which is sort of a subgroup within the government that deals with different issues. The departments are part of the Cabinet Office, which is an authority that helps the government to rule the nation and actualize their politics. The government is made up of 4 different parties, where the largest party has the most influence and authority over the decisions. This way, there is a hierarchy established. However, the smaller parties need to get their opinions and proposals through in order to maintain their votes and their seat in the government. So they all have to agree to some extent and have to be able to cooperate with each other. In fact, all 24 ministers, including the Prime Minister, have to agree when they are making the decisions. In this case, consensus is vital, which means they have strong cohesiveness. All the parties have different ideologies and ideas about how the society should be governed, which always influences their decisions. The current government basically has the same basic view, or group thinking, even though the parties differ to some extent. The formal purpose of the government is, naturally, to protect its citizens and their property from threats, such as economic recession. It rules the country and is the engine that keeps the country running. It is responsible for changing our laws and in that way influences societal development. And since it is a democratically elected government, its decisions are influenced by the will of the people. And apart from electing the people in the government, the citizens themselves can become members if they are over 18. Everyone has the same rights and opportunity to influence the politics and scrutinize how the politicians and public agencies should exercise their power. So in this way, they are sort of cooperating with the people and need a consensus.
During the 90s, Sweden's economy went into a deep recession. The inflation rate was high and the government failed to carry through the necessary changes to stop the increasing inflation. It was therefore obvious that some austerity measures were needed in order to protect the crown, even at the cost of rising unemployment. The government said that the state would guarantee all deposits and creditors of all banks and assumed all bad bank debts. 65 billion crowns were spent in order to rescue the banks, and the fixed exchange rate was substituted with a floating exchange rate, and taxpayers contributed with 64 billion crowns in order to cover the loss of the banks. When the 2008 crisis occurred, the government had learned a lesson and was more prepared. In comparison to the crisis during the 1930s, they have been able to avoid mass unemployment and hopelessness. One of the lessons learned from them is that the financial system has to be supported, and if the government had not intervened with massive support and guarantees, we would have had experienced an economical meltdown. Why the government succeeded in stabilizing the economy is partly because it made sure that the finances remained strong. They cut down the public spending expense, basically sticking to their budget, and they made sure that the people paid their taxes, compared to other countries that let their expenses splint and that didn't keep an eye on people so that they paid their taxes and to take responsibility. Even though we had a financial crisis, the government managed to remain stable, which could mean that the government as a group is strongly connected. The government was quick to react and their management of the crisis worked well. When the government rapidly came up with a proposal that would help the banks during the crisis, the parliament approved it immediately, without causing a debate, even though it might have gone against some ideology of some party. They approved it because they considered it to be the best and most logical solution for Sweden and its well-being. And one could argue that this is a sign of good cooperation and group functionality within the Swedish government.
You've been presented with the Swedish government and how it functions, how government acts generally, and how it dealt with the crisis. And the best psychological perspective that can describe this is cognitive. Beginning to analyze the 2008 crisis, it is clear that the government, as a body of people, has used assimilation in order to solve its problems, and the way the government dealt with the crisis in the 90s proved sufficient in battling the issue at hand. And although the reasons for the crisis were not the same, as every crisis brings on a new one, the government was able to process its already existing knowledge and deal with this new issue. At first sight, it seemed as if accommodation should not be necessary, as we have been dealing with several economic crises since the 1930s. However, every crisis brings on a new challenge, as I have said before, which is also the reason why it has been 5 years and the problem has not yet been solved. What really made a difference in how the government dealt with the issue this time and how stable their economy was before the crisis hit. Having a stable economy, Sweden had no problems accommodating to the new dilemmas the crisis brought. While still dealing with the crisis, all of the new information has been gathered, and strategies that have worked or have not worked, everything, and it's all been added to the schema of the economic sciences. And it is, of course, essential that a balance between assimilation and accommodation is maintained, and Sweden proved to be an expert in this field. And, of course, historical accounts of financial crises suggest that fear and greed are the most common attributes in times like these, and it is understandable. And now, the cognitive neurosciences may provide some insight into this pattern through a better understanding of the dynamics of human behavior and emotions. The cognitive patterns develop through one's life through experiences and are thusly most based on empiricism. This is why cognitive psychology explains the course of action taken by the government very well, and that's why we have chosen it. Good luck in the financial crisis.